Hannah hung up the phone, then walked over to the 4-foot-tall 5-shelf CD rack. The rack held 230 CDs, all sorted in alphabetical order, with overflow stacked about 10 high on the floor on either side of the rack. Most of the albums were alternative, grunge and rock. Radiohead, Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Beastie Boys, Pixies, 9 Inch Nails, Jawbreaker. There was some classic rock as well. Pink Floyd, the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, and The Clash. She hated the silence. So music was always playing, or the TV was always on. Background noise was a tool to help control her thoughts. Being alone in her head was a scary place. Running her finger down the CD case spines, she searched for the evening soundtrack. She stopped in the middle of the 4th shelf and removed a case. Siamese Dream by the Smashing Pumpkins. She slid the CD into the Discman, closed the lid, and pressed play. The disc began to spin, then after a few seconds of silence, a quick snare roll signified the start of Cherub Rock. The snare was followed by a clean guitar, then bass quarter notes, and finally the distorted guitars. It gave her chills every time. Hannah smiled, her favorite song on her current favorite album. Favorite albums usually only lasted a week or two, and on the rare occasion, only a couple of days. Last week, it was In Utero by Nirvana, and before that, it was Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, Oasis, What's the Story, Morning Glory, and Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, with The Bends by Radiohead making an appearance almost quarterly. Hannah could lie in the middle of the floor and listen to High and Dry or Fake Plastic Trees on repeat for hours. That was her sanctuary. For some people, music could be life-changing. For Hannah, it was life-saving. At certain times in her life, music had been her only friend, and she felt closer to a musician she'd never met than someone she'd talked to hundreds of times. That was by choice, though. For Hannah, it was easier to push people away than get close to someone. She grabbed her coat, slipped the Discman into her purse, and stepped out of her apartment. After slamming the door, she walked 5 steps, then suddenly stopped. Turning around, she stared at the doorknob. She knew she'd locked it, but the longer she stared, the more uncertain she became. Hannah hated this feeling. But as the thoughts became routine, she became accustomed to them and accepted them. Finally, after 20 seconds, she walked over to the door and placed her hand on the doorknob. The door was locked, but she turned it 3 more times, silently counting with each turn. In the alley outside her building, the aroma of piss punched her in the face, but it quickly faded. She was used to the smell, and it was a prerequisite of living in Capitol Hill. There wasn't a pile of shit or used syringes to sidestep, so that was a win. She walked past a series of dumpsters and parked cars, then skipped onto the sidewalk, heading east on 10th Avenue toward King Soopers, the only grocery store within a 5-mile radius. Hannah stared down at the sidewalk, timing each step so as not to step on a crack. Short steps, big steps, half steps, double steps, avoiding the cracks at all costs. 3 blocks into the walk, a homeless man in a wheelchair sat next to a bus stop, probably in his 50s and pushing 300 pounds. He looked like he hadn't showered in weeks, and his left leg was amputated below the knee. The man was holding a weathered sign with a black Sharpie. Why lie? I need a fucking beer. Some sort of Labrador mix with numerous bald spots lay next to the right wheel. Hannah stopped, and they made eye contact. She quickly looked at the dog and smiled. "What's his name?" she asked. "Him? That's Bandit," the man said, coughing. Hannah crouched and extended her hand. Bandit sat up, and she started petting his head, massaging behind his ear. He began licking her forearm. She'd always preferred animals over people. "Hi, Bandit."
"Yeah, he's about all I got left. About the only one who's willing to put up with all my bullshit."
Hannah glanced up for a moment, then back down. She continued petting Bandit, and his tail incessantly slapped onto the sidewalk. Standing, she pulled out her wallet and removed a $5 bill and 3 singles, handing the money to the man. "I'm sorry, this is all the cash I have." He reached a timid hand out and took the bills.
God bless. God bless you, my darling."
Hannah waved and then continued east on 10th. When she was done shopping, she placed the divider onto the conveyor belt and started taking items out of the basket. 4 boxes of Pop-Tarts, 2 boxes of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, a gallon of milk, 2 Totino's pepperoni pizzas, 4 Snickers, a king-size bag of peanut M&Ms, 5 cans of Friskies salmon cat food, and 5 cans of pedigree gravy with beef dog food. Her diet was like that of a 14-year-old boy whose parents were on vacation. Hannah's favorite meal was a bowl of cereal, and on most days that was all she ate. But even with a high-sugar, high-carbohydrate diet, she'd never weighed more than 100 pounds. A couple with a baby was at the register in front of Hannah. They were close to her age, maybe a couple years older at the most. Hannah watched them. They smiled at her, and she smiled back. Hannah knew they loved each other, and loved being part of a family, and being parents, and probably owned a beautiful house in City Park or Congress Park. And the husband had a successful career, and the wife was a stay-at-home mom, and they went to dinner parties with their successful friends, who also lived in their beautiful houses, with their beautiful children. That was the life she'd never have. As a teenager, Hannah had dreamt of a storybook wedding. A husband who was an architect, maybe an engineer. 2 kids, a boy and girl. The boy 3 years older to protect his younger sister. A house in the mountains with a garden in the backyard. And flowers. Yes, lots of flowers. Marigolds and pansies and salvias. That dream had died a long time ago. On her way home, she stopped at the homeless man and Bandit and handed him a grocery bag with the dog food, bananas, Snickers, and box of granola bars. He opened it up, looked into it, then looked back up at her, becoming teary-eyed.
"I don't know what to say,"
he said, wiping away a tear. "Have a good night." Hannah continued west on 10th Avenue, popping M&Ms into her mouth, avoiding the cracks at all fucking costs.